So in this video, we're going to walk through why your sales team keeps getting the same objections and how to actually fix it. Now, for some quick context, I've generated $40 million US online through sales management, and not including the millions I've generated through coaching sales reps individually and constantly breaking company records for clients. Now, why this document exists is that every 7-figure sales team eventually hits this ceiling where reps keep getting the same 5 to 10 offer-specific objections or questions or concerns, and they answer them differently every single time because there's no process in place. Now, because of this, close rates fluctuate or stall, authority fluctuates wildly between salespeople in your team, and follow-ups drag, and this sales cycle increases for your team. Now, the problem isn't the fact that you're getting these concerns specifically, it's that you don't have a structured system for farming these questions, classifying them, sourcing the truth, and then specifically delivering them contextually to the prospect in a manner that you know will benefit the sale. Sort of old school of sales where you just ram the response down the prospect's throat, and of course they just think that you're trying to get them to buy the product. And this document will fix that. So the core idea behind what I'm doing here is that every question follows the same model. It doesn't matter what niche you're in, whether you're in insurance, all the way to a biz op, to real estate coaching, what have you, right? Every offer specific question can be broken down into these steps. So first, what was asked? Was it about, say, deal flow? Was it about when are you going to make an ROI? Am I going to start losing weight? It doesn't really matter what it is what was asked specifically or the content behind the question. Then the positioning of the question. So did the prospect ask it pre-pitch or post-pitch? So before the presentation or after the presentation? This is an important step with how we deal with it. From there, once you clarified, was it soft, collaborative, or skeptical in the prospect's second response? And we'll get to all of this. I'm going to walk through the scripting as an example for all of these approaches, so it's all going to make sense, right? So what content knowledge bucket does it sit in, and what is the correct mechanism-backed response? Once you do this properly, the soft or skeptical offer-specific objections stop being emotional and they simply become pattern recognition and an opportunity for the salesperson to actually inject certainty, and it actually benefits the sale. So salespeople can actually look forward to the prospect asking it. So the first step is to farm these questions, and ideally you do this daily, at least until you build up the knowledge bank of all of these questions that you get from the prospect. So every rep should log in some form of booking sheet or in their CRM the exact questions verbatim that the prospect is giving them specific to the offer that requires specialized knowledge to be delivered in a sales-friendly manner. So when it was asked, as I said, pre or post pitch, how it was delivered, right? Whether it was soft and easy, and I'll get to what that looks like, collaborative or skeptical from the prospect, and then the outcome of the call once, the answer was given. You do not want to trust your memory. If you don't log it, you can't optimize it. And on this, after managing teams for 3 years, you'd be surprised that you could see that salespeople will literally get hit by these questions for months and never tell their sales manager, which is why you need to be quality controlling and reviewing as many calls as possible to make sure, obviously, you identify in the data whether the salesperson is performing. But if someone isn't performing, you might want to review specific constraints in their skill up in the sales call, but you should definitely check post-presentation how they're answering questions off the back of the presentation, because salespeople, as I said, will literally suffer in silence and never go out and ask their manager or the founder what the answer is to this question about the product. And then you obviously see founders as well who don't think that it's important for their salespeople to actually understand the specialized knowledge of the offer, which might work for something that's low ticket, but it certainly doesn't work for something and the more high ticket it goes, right? This is critical that your salespeople are farming this information and you're arming them with the knowledge, and then you go through the training that I'll talk about. So in step 2, you want to normalize and categorize weekly. So once per week, the sales manager should merge the duplicates. If obviously there's different salespeople are asking the same question or knowledge, rewrite them into a standardized format and an SOP, and I'll get to the benefits of why we do this, and then assign a specific category. So typical categories, depending on your offer, could be deal finding, competition, time constraints, risk, geography, capital requirements, value add mechanics, financing structure, timelines, and execution confidence. You just really need to look at your presentation and consider all of the aspects of the offer that a prospect, no matter how aware they are, whether they're not aware or most aware, what type of offer specific questions they'll ask, and what are these categories. And you will discover at the end of the day that 80% of the revenue friction that you're facing will come from about 20% of the recurring questions. So you might get 10 questions, but ultimately 2 or 3 of them are the ones that get asked 80% of the time to your salespeople or to you if you're the salesperson. And this is where the leverage lies, because you want mastery in those aspects, and I'll explain why. Now with step 3, the stage matters more than the content of your answer. So the same question will be handled differently depending on when it's asked in the sales process, right? And I'll break this down in every manner. So if it's pre-pitch, you're protecting the frame and the structure first and foremost. The goal isn't simply to solve it like it was after the presentation. Instead, the goal is to contain, to make sure that you maintain the frame. So you either lightly acknowledge it, park it without sweeping it under the rug, and I'll give an exact scripted example of how I suggest you do this in some way, shape, or form. The promised coverage that you'll ideally go over it, and then you return back to the sales process. You never want to let these pre-pitched questions derail your authority, because ultimately, as we know, if you deliver this information before context is provided from them on their specific situation and other aspects of the offer, it won't be found how you think when you deliver that information. So that's why it's primary. If the questions are asked pre-pitch, we obviously restore the frame, reassure the prospect that we'll actually deliver that information to them only once we get the information we need. That way we're not pushing it under the rug and sort of shutting the prospect up. We're actually selling them on the idea that you can't actually accurately answer the question until you know more about them, or until other information is provided because it's in a sequence, for example. So that's everything pre-pitch. If it's post-pitch, now it's all evaluation, where you solve through probing and clarifying and then reframing accurately. Post-pitch questions are often buying questions that swing on the delivery of the last sort of 5% of information that the prospect just needs to really rationalize what's sort of already an emotional decision that they've almost made, and they just need that logic that you will or you won't provide them, right? So you want to treat these questions preciously and accordingly, okay? Now from step 4, we want to look at the delivery intensity from the prospect, whether they give it to us soft, collaborative, or skeptical. And this is where most people fail. It's not what they ask, it's how they ask it. So if the prospect says it in a soft way, it's usually non-threatening, it's just curious, and they really don't have a lot of a strong argument or content around their concern at the back of the presentation. And I'll give you examples of it. So in this case, this is just high level. You affirm and then you tighten it, right? It's just minimal friction. It's very simple to get past. Now, the one you'll see 80% of the time is the collaborative question that you get from the prospect, where it's just collaboratively delivered doubt. And you'll see this if you actually have a good call upstream and you build trust with the prospect. They'll actually sort of put you on the same side of the table and just lay out their concern about the offer. And then they're really thinking about it with you. And then you can probe, clarify, reframe, and then really tie down the clarity, and it's pretty well swept up. In other cases, depending on the avatar and how well you've done in the call, the prospect may be skeptical, defensive, and emotional. And oftentimes the way they actually clarify why they want to know, it's too vague to actually identify the root of the concern. So it just comes off as cold and you can't really analyze it. And this is where most salespeople just get completely stuck. And then they start umming and ahhing and slapping on information that doesn't even answer the question. So for example, the prospect said, "When do I start making money?" And then the salesperson says, "Oh yeah, you start making money and most people make money in week 6. And then yeah, the training's really good and you get like loads of help and we're there with you every day." When that wasn't, like, you're answering beyond the question they asked, and obviously the way that you're delivering is low certainty because you didn't take time to create separation and actually understand why they're asking it, right? Or at least deliver it in a manner because you've heard it so many times or you've been trained on it so many times that you know exactly how to reframe it. In this case, you do not want to interrogate the prospect. You just want to use back-footed authority, and you leverage precedent, which is past results, which I'll get into in my example. And then you deliver the mechanism, which is the specific way that you deal with it, and the language of logic or the logical stream of acceptances that the prospect will come to, which will obviously benefit the sale. And then you ask forward commitment questions. You just clarify if the reframe was effective, okay? Now in step 5, we want to source the truth before building the script or the response. So before building an answer, you have to extract the mechanism of how it actually works. And this is coming down to essentially having the specialized knowledge. The mechanism of how it actually works, the constraint, which must be true, and then the proof and the precedent. You'll see it all in an example. What we want to do to get that specialized knowledge is pull from the founder, The fulfillment is like for the program modules, any of the SOPs, case studies, and internal examples you have within your offer. You don't want to let reps invent the logic live. It will lack certainty and it will be unethical because it's probably not true. So the truth must be centralized. So if you're a sales manager, you need to take command of this and give it to your salespeople for an ethical standpoint and ultimately make more sales, right? Now, step 6 is to convert all that packaged specialized information into deliverable responses from the salespeople that they're drilled on. And this can fill and be a tremendous way to leverage on team meetings or on one-on-ones where your salespeople can become weapons at responding to the prospect's concern. So the sales answers should match the intensity, use 2 to 3 sentences, preserve authority, and move forward. Just like I said in that example of when the prospect asks, when am I going to start making money? You're not over speaking, right? You're matching the intensity, you're preserving your own authority. You only say as much as needed because you don't need to prove anything because you don't need the sale. You never want to over-educate, like my example. You never want to info dump, again, like my example, and just answer it 2% more than the prospect knows. You don't want to over dump them with knowledge that ends up making them feel like, even if it was in context of their question, beyond what's going to make them feel like if they're going to get overwhelmed, you don't want to do that. Again, just answer to the question. And it's more about the delivery and getting the prospect to clarify why it's important to them and reframing their perspective on it. Because at the end of the day, there's thousands of things that they need to know. And if it's not reframed in a manner that gets them to feel the confidence that you're just going to take care of these things and they need to see that authority, they could ask 1,000 questions. So it's about the feeling the salesperson can actually establish on the call to get the prospect to calm down and realize ultimately it's just a thing I have to trust them, as long as I obviously know from the presentation and I've had a good call, right? And then from there we redirect. So now we're getting into the examples that will bring this all into context for you. And the example I'm going to use, this can be used for, you can really reason by analogy here and look at like deal finding from a perspective of real estate, mergers and acquisition, like buying businesses, what have you. You can even look at it through a lens if you can sort of abstract it through identifying profitable trades if you're selling a trading offer, or overcoming specific concerns about a mechanism within a fitness program. It really doesn't matter. It's down to how well you can see the principle and decouple that from the specific example of like deal finding. So let's walk through it together so it all makes sense, right? The prospect's question might be, how confident are you that this will allow me to find the right deals? Now, if it's pre-pitch, what the rep wants to do is what's called light containment. So for example, you can see here, that entirely depends on whatever specific situation, and we'll certainly cover exactly how deal identification works in detail today. And I suppose first it would really help if we could understand and then go to your next question. That shouldn't be unfamiliar to you when you just return to the process or the next question in the script. And again, that's like I laid out before, because the overarching objective is to retain the frame and not get pulled out of context where the prospect can't appreciate as if you had answered the question directly, right? It's for their own benefit and for yours. Now, where it really happens most of the time is post-presentation, and I'm going to break down within post-presentation the type of actual like question and the way the prospect is approaching it 80% of the time, and the other 10% of the time, right? So if it's post-pitch and soft, that's usually 10% of the time. What the rep will need to do is ask, okay, what aspects of like deal identification do you feel wouldn't allow you to find the right deal? Now, what we're doing here is really reading between the lines and understand the prospects technically just asked this question. How confident are you you'll be able to find the right deals? But any good salesperson will know the prospect's not asking these questions just to get the information. It's because they have an internal concern. They're trying to use that information to answer a question that they want to answer on their own, because prospects have been trained to not ask the salesperson for something knowing the salesperson is just going to say, don't worry. So they'll ask about information so that they can put that together and realize, am I going to get results? Like, when would I start making money? Isn't like so I can know and mark it in my diary. It's, am I going to make my money back? Because they're lacking certainty in the process. You always need to read between the lines and understand the implicit meaning behind these questions. And that's why when we clarify that how confident are you that I'll be able to find deals, is that we want to ask it in this way that like literally calls out the concern implicitly as well. You're matching their intensity. See what I mean? So what aspects of deal identification do you feel like, I guess, wouldn't allow you to find the right deal? This allows the prospect to actually voice their concern. It also gets them to have to like dig their flag in the sand and rationalize why it is a real concern if it is. So in the case of the soft prospect, they'll typically give a reason that you actually covered in the presentation. From there, this is what happens like 90% of the time when these soft kind of like response, they go, oh, I just didn't know. And you can just hear that like you covered that in the presentation. So all the rep needs to do is loop back to the aspect of the presentation that covers it and then just clarify, does it make sense? The prospect will say yes. In this case, then what the salesperson wants to do, again, which is a principle we always want to comply with, is clarify and tie down. For example, and I guess, do you feel like that clarifies how we help our clients like find the right deals? And then they'll say yes, and then you just move forward. You may have another question, and this cycle may repeat. The person, you may ask, do you have any other questions? They say no, and you loop and you move forward to taking the order if that's what's in your sales process. Okay, so that's like soft offer specific objection after the presentation. All right, quick pause and then we'll get back to the video. If you do over $1 million a year and you want your sales team to scale predictably, I run one-to-one sales management consulting done with you. You can apply at the link. We onboard a few managers each month, so you can grab a slot and then we'll install your one-to-one system together. Now back to the video. Now, this is what happens 80% of the time, and this is when you're gonna be able to implement today, and you'll see literally 80% of the time when you're on sales calls or your salespeople are on calls, is post-pitch, and it's done in a sort of a collaborative way, especially if you've had a good call upstream. What the rep will do is once again ask, what aspects of deal identification do you feel wouldn't allow you to find the right deal? The prospect will say something like this. It'll have content in it where you can read between the lines and see what their concern is and start putting two and two together. Like if we look at this right here, well, I guess, like what if there's too much competition in the market? What are they thinking once again? Like any ROI based offer, I'm not gonna make money. This isn't gonna work, right? That's why they're asking that question. They don't care about how many people are in competition. They're thinking about it from their own lens so they can navigate whether they're gonna make the commitment. So the prospect says, well, I guess if there's too much competition in the market, like, I don't know, like, yeah, is there too much competition? And what do most salespeople say that aren't like trained well? They'll go, oh, no, it's actually like blue ocean. There's like loads. Do you think they're going to believe that? Obviously, that benefits you as a salesperson to say that. And there hasn't been any understanding from the salesperson. And anyone that rushes to solve someone's problem like that clearly needs the sale and has an incentive that may not benefit the prospect, which is going to turn them off. So what the salesperson wants to do is take this approach where we cover the perspective, we reframe, and then we clarify. So as you can see, I understand, so I'm not rushing to solve it. Now, just so you know, most clients initially worry about competition before they've specifically built the right filtering skill. And then they find through actually getting the skill that the edge isn't simply speed, it's evaluation clarity. So I should ask, is competition your concern or more so deal quality? Yeah, well, deal quality at the end of the day. Okay, that makes sense. And do you feel like that process that we went through of how we help our clients do whatever that was in the presentation that gives them the skill of the deal quality would ultimately help with identifying opportunities in a timely and, I guess more importantly, an accurate manner? Yeah, I do. And you've just completely reframed it. Because what we're doing is setting a new perspective. Instead of pushing back or just providing no evidence and saying, no, it's a blue ocean, it's saying, yeah, it is competitive if you don't get the skills. What does that language of logic tell the prospect? You need to make the investment so that you get the skills. You will face competition. That concern is true, right? The fact that you're agreeing with their concern but building on it zooms out the frame and gives the prospect a bigger perspective and then gets them to see that by investing in the program or whatever it is, they're not going to have that concern. But if they don't invest in the program, what's going to happen? It's a real concern. And you can fill this depending on whatever the concern is. I'm just using deal identification because it's a pretty good example for a lot of offers. So that's your standard, like 80% of the time. What you want to do is when the prospect asks specifically, don't rush to quickly answer it. Just always want to clarify, like through like, why do you feel like there'd be concern? See what they say. They'll give you some content that tells you like really what they're worried about. And then from there, the sequencing or the structure should be that the salesperson shares the perspective, they reframe, and then they get clarity. And then this tie down ultimately just does it one more time and get the prospect to really like, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If they say it twice, they definitely believe it, right? And you're literally imprincipally asking like that, it would ultimately help you with identifying opportunities in a timely, accurate manner. Like, would it get you to the benefit? And they're like, yes. So it's just very, very tight. And it's actually, once again, you can see when you execute this well, it's actually almost an opportunity to re-pitch, right? And the prospect gets more bought in. So like even more bought in than in the end of the presentation. This is why I never minded. And as soon as I finished asking my question, I honestly, unless they ask me like 17 questions, I actually like them asking me these questions. As soon as I finish the answer, I just go quiet and go, any other questions? And just leave it like dead space and make them realize and help them realize that I'll be here all day. I can clarify anything because I have conviction in the offer. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to trust, right? We do all these things and you probably aren't aware of the questions you should be asking. So like at the end of the day, it's going to come down to trust. But if you are going to answer questions, I'm here for you and clarify it and help them see the bigger picture, right? So that's an example of what happens 80% of the time. That's why I'm sort of focusing on that a bit more. Now, this is an interesting one. If you do get 10% of the time post-presentation, a very skeptical concern at the end of the pitch, again, what do? The sequencing. What aspects of deal identification do you feel wouldn't allow you to find the right deal? And the prospects gives you vague BS where you can't really like work out why they have the concern. They go, I don't know, you tell me. Like, I'm just not sure if this is going to be applicable in future. Like the market's always changing or something like that. You get like very little and vague reason why they're asking. And you can sure go into and like, that's fine, whatever works, right? You can go in there and try and dig down and probe and start battling it. But you start losing out there if you don't do that well. And it can become very much more difficult and frictionless to try to probe in and really say, well, what is the concern ultimately, than just hitting this sequence, which works just as well, if not better, and it doesn't cause any friction. So what you want to do is have an authority anchor. So in this example, okay, well, the perspective I share, which is once again leading in and not rushing to answer, the perspective I share is that ultimately founder name has applied this through multiple market cycles. Now, we're not going to sit here and tell you like we know what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, but we simply use the law of precedent and the fact that founder name has had success helping hundreds of clients generate result over the last 3 years through changing markets. And it's just due to the fact that principle-based deal filtering works across cycles. And at the end of the day, man, like our clients realize it's not about chasing listings. It's about identifying underpriced inefficiencies, which is a skill that one does or just doesn't have. I guess, does that address the question you had around competition? Like, yeah. So see, it's not trying too hard. It's once again just setting a new perspective, but you can only do that if you have the specialized knowledge. But again, you don't have to be a property expert or an mergers and acquisition buying businesses expert to say that, to know that. It's just 2% great information packaged well, not rushed into, because you could get technically someone who's been in whatever we're talking about here, real estate, for 25 years, and they won't deliver it as well as a salesperson who has a couple of weeks of specialized knowledge training and sales ability. So it's much about the way we do it, the order of which we do it, that matters, and then just that 2% greater skill delta to reframe the prospect's perspective and then dismantle the objection and neutralize it, right? So that's what happens in the case where they don't give us much content. What we need to rely on ultimately is that we just reset the entire frame that, like, with respect, we know what we're doing. We've helped thousands of other clients do it. What do you think is going to happen if you commit? All right. So that's what we do. So step 7 is you want to have a weekly operating rhythm. Every week, you identify the top 5 recurring questions that you or your salespeople get, then build and refine the responses into a single source of truth or an SOP, role play them, then track the actual data, so the impact on the close rate, and just make sure you remove over explanation like I explained on that other example. So what you want to do is measure the close rate delta, which is just the change in close rate percentage once the responses are being executed, and you can quality control it, and you're not just like believing because you trained it on a team meeting that everyone's doing it now. You actually know that your team is doing like above 90% compliance with those responses. And again, if you weave this into your culture and make it part of your team meetings and your one-on-ones and your core reviews and your assets, you're going to have a lot easier time to make sure that it's enforced. And then you can have reliability over looking at that data, knowing that it's trending up partially, at least because of that reason. So you want to measure the close rate delta and the sales cycle compression, which is the days to close, because the delivery of valuable and relevant information is what develops the customer's state of awareness and then lowers their action threshold. So this will get you out of this narrative of like helplessness where, oh, we went from organic to paid traffic or somewhere to cold traffic. Now they're just colder by the time they jump on the sales call. If you're not a baby bird, you understand that all that is that they have less awareness over the value of the offer that marketing assets would have done upstream. And what you can do as a salesperson is actually solve for that. And if you're a sales manager, you should take it into your own hands that is helped being already delivered in, for example, the thank you page or pre-call sales assets, but don't rely on it as a salesperson, right? Make sure that you can do it on the call and develop the customer state of awareness through the delivery of valuable and important relevant information at the end of the presentation, and you'll be sweet. And then the follow-up close rate, it's really the same as above. Now, the real leverage is that the system doesn't just improve the answers. What it does is it creates uniformity across the rep execution, again, making it easy for you as a sales manager to quality control, because you can almost have certainty after a while that the salespeople are covered for that. There's not like a bunch of problems, just one less problem to worry about, knowing that your salespeople are benefiting the sale in that phase of the sales call. What it also does is provides authority to the salesperson, which always helps. It reduces cognitive load for the salesperson, allowing them to focus on the delivery. Because when someone knows what they're talking about, there's that weight to when they're saying it. And then what is maybe a beautifully constructed answer, but said with doubt, like 96% of intent in English is delivered through the tone, the pacing, the cueing, the volume, the pitch, all these other things. So when they really understand it and you drill it a lot and they have certainty over the answer that it works, then the salesperson can just be in the moment and deliver it in a very natural way and they don't sound like a robot. What it will also do tremendously is streamline the ramping to KPI for new sales professionals. This is for anyone, whether it's like literally a standard 5K biz up sales course all the way up to a 25, 50K inner circle mastermind, 1 year long coaching, whatever it is for something far more sophisticated. It will streamline the ramping to KPI. It is even more critical the high ticket you go, because prospects aren't just going to take like certainty stories. We all know, if you do, that when you're selling to a sophisticated prospect, a huge part of the sale swings on the superiority of the mechanism, which is done through the presentation and you as the sales rep conveying your understanding of specialized knowledge, because they're using you as a proxy to understand what the program's like. If the salesperson doesn't know what they're talking about, they're not going to have the certainty and they're going to want to speak to someone else maybe, if not, go to someone else. So this is critical for helping new sales professionals ramp, especially on more sophisticated offers. And what it does is it converts offer-based concerns into streamlined pattern recognition across the team, right? So the salespeople actually look forward to it and they know how to function. So when this is installed properly, offer-based concerns stop feeling like friction and they become predictable checkpoints for a sales professional to inject certainty and consistently benefit the sale. Now, if you want this installed for your team, you can see how we do it here, but I hope you enjoyed it. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I check every single one. And if you're someone who wants speed and real implementation, whether you're a founder, a sales manager, or even a closer who wants to level up, there's links in the description where you can book a call and apply to actually work with me directly. And if you want to keep learning, here's the next video I recommend. You can watch it now.